Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this work session of the Washington County Board of Education. We're meeting in work session this afternoon to receive information and to discuss that information. There will be no voting, as this is not a meeting where we will be taking any formal action. So we have two topics on our agenda this afternoon: teacher recruitment, hiring, and new teacher induction, and also the presentation of the audited financial statements and the auditor's report. So with that, I'll turn things over to Dr. Sovine so that he can introduce our first team of presenters. Dr. Sovine.
Thank you, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, members of the board. As is tradition, typically in October, we spend some time in a work session format providing the board and public with an update regarding teacher recruitment, hiring, and new teacher induction. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Tim Haynes, our Coordinator of Talent Acquisition and Development, and Mrs. Joni Burkhart, our Supervisor of Professional Learning Forward, who will provide this evening's or this afternoon's presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sovine, President Williams, and members of the board. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Thank you. So once again, Joni and I are pleased to present information for the 23-24 school year. As you can see from our first slide, this is a reflection of teacher turnover for the last 4 years. The first thing you'll notice from the top row is that we're getting back to more normalized numbers since the pandemic, and so coming back to 10 and 15-year averages. Two things to note is that while our resignations are averaging the same, where we really saw some improvement were in our retiree numbers over the last 2 years and also in non-renewals. This is a key factor into what we're moving forward with this upcoming year, which is teacher retention. Much like the adage in sales, it's much more cost efficient to keep current teachers or customers rather than finding new ones. And so we're really looking at efforts and what we can do to keep these retention numbers, not only where they are now, but even get them even higher. And just one note on the retirees. As you'll see in a slide I'll have upcoming, our workforce, particularly our teaching workforce, is getting younger every year. And so that's why we're seeing those retiree numbers come down. On the next slide, you'll see total applications over the past 6 years. And while we're coming back down to more numbers that reflect an average over the last 10 to 15 years, that doesn't mean that we're seeing a decrease in the quality of our candidates. It just means that we're filtering out, I think, some of the, you'll see that peak during the pandemic years where we had an influx of applications. It wasn't necessarily that they were high quality applicants. There was so much turmoil during those times, we were just seeing an increase like a lot of other counties in our districts. And so we're just coming back to a more normalized area. Just a few of the recruitment strategies that we've utilized. A lot of these are typical for what we've been doing over recent years, including the National Board Certification Incentive. Just wanted to also note that we're utilizing more realms in the digital area, including Google Ads, which are highly effective in a lot of different areas where we can't reach, where newspapers just aren't reaching the audiences they used to, or radio isn't reaching certain audiences or billboards. And so everyone has their device with them, and so we're reaching into those digital realms. Also, a lot of emphasis this upcoming year is, as we have this past year, on growing our own initiatives, looking at our current student population and also within our current workforce and where there are opportunities for development and growth. And we also, in collaboration with the public information team, redesigned all of our promotional materials to ensure that they were aligning with the design work that's being utilized across county, but also the strategic plan. And that tied in perfectly with our new referral program. It's not something new. We've known that between Indeed and word of mouth campaigns, that's where the majority of our candidates come from, but really just formalizing it and making sure that we're keeping it in front of all of our current employees, that they're referring people that they know to apply for jobs with WCPS. The Maryland Accelerates program, we're in our third year. I won't go over that again. I've discussed it for numerous years now, but from our first cohort, we do have 13 full-time teachers that came out of that program. This past year, this current year, I'm sorry, we hired 7 from the 2023-24 cohort, and we currently have 8 students that are in that now. So they are now in their full 140-day student-teacher programs, and so we look forward to bringing them on into our teaching ranks next year. As of right now, we have 169 new teachers. When this slide was made, it was 167, but we have added 2 new special ed case managers since this was created. And if you look over 10-year data, we are right where we were on average. You'll see 2 fluctuations in that. In 2019-20, that's when we were ramping up our pre-K programs countywide, which indicates that increase. And then last year, we had a massive curricular change at the middle school levels, which had a ripple effect into our high schools. And so we had to increase those math and ELA teachers and supplemental teachers, which is why you saw a good reason for that bump. And so we're coming back down to what is an average for us. A little snapshot of some of our content areas. Nothing new here, although I will note that we had 19 math teachers this year. So in the last 2 years, we've actually hired 47 math teachers, which is remarkable considering that our average prior to this was about 5 to 6 per year. So it's pretty significant that we've been able to do that. And a lot of that falls on our content teams, who are incredible in following up with candidates, reaching out, finding, and also in our HR team, particularly Lindsay Darr, in finding candidates that do have that previous math experience and we're able to transition into some of those teaching positions. And you'll also see an increase in special education. Again, that's a major emphasis that we have, and is a challenging area, but we have been very fortunate in finding some very good candidates for those positions as well. Where do our teachers come from? 32 of our new teachers were previous substitutes, 36 were student teachers, 6 paraprofessionals, and 2 coaches. And as I indicated earlier, 48% of our new teachers have 0 experience, so they're coming right out of teacher prep programs, and another 38% have less than 10 years experience. This is what we've been seeing for the last 5 to 10 years, so that's why you're seeing those retiree numbers come down, because our student workforce is getting younger every year. Before I turn it over to Joni, does anyone have any questions about recruitment or hiring?
I do.
Yes.
Going back to the graph that's showing applications submitted. So with a smaller candidate pool, applicant pool,
Right.
and I'm going to find a delicate way to say this, are we finding that the caliber of applicants is the same or better than it has been in previous years?
I'll let Joni weigh in on this as well. I would say from the HR perspective, it's about the same. Teacher prep programs have seen their enrollments drop. I shared a graphic last year with some pretty alarming numbers in the 4-state region on not only teacher prep program enrollment is down significantly over the last 10 years, but also those graduate numbers have dropped. But the individuals coming through, well, let me back that up one second. So the whole concept of what teaching means has changed somewhat in our society. And so it's attracting fewer people to the field, but the ones that are attracted to that field understand what a modern classroom looks like and what the needs are for that. And so I would say they are better prepared. They do have a better understanding. The teacher prep programs are struggling just because their enrollment numbers are down and it's harder for them to staff, but they're still coming out as well prepared as they were before. And I feel like they're stronger candidates coming out of the gates early on. Attorney, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I will ditto exactly what Tim said. I think you did a great job at that. And I also think that this year, like in last year, the teachers are excited to be here. They're willing to learn. They're willing to learn about Washington County. They're coming from different places and they have an understanding of teaching. I do think we are starting to see a recovery from the lack of applicants that we had before to now. So it's a good, they're a good group.
Thank you. So would you think that other counties in Maryland are experiencing the same thing as far as applicants, numbers of applicants? I guess what I'm getting at is there a reason that we are having fewer applicants? Is there something that we could be doing or something that they're not seeing in Washington County Public Schools that they would be more inclined to apply elsewhere in the state?
As far as I can tell from my colleagues across the state and in other areas, this is the trend. This is what applicant pools are looking like.
Okay.
And we were actually in a more advantageous position this year because while we did have some budget restraints, they weren't as significant as some of our neighboring counties, which put us in a better position. And so we did have the opportunity to find better candidates and bring them in and have very few vacancies going into this year. And any that have popped up have been last minute retirements, resignations, that sort of thing. Just things that will happen no matter what. And so while that number is not as high, I do believe the quality is just as high as it's ever been. And we're doing a better job of assessing who will come in and succeed here.
Great, great. And I just have one other question, and that's with regard to the charts of experience of new teachers. And when I look at the numbers for connections to WCPS, and I do the math there, it appears that about half of the total number of new teachers had a connection to Washington County Public Schools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we're trying to build off of that, and really getting into
But
that.
are we looking at that as kind of a baseline? Or
Oh,
just a-
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. And we're very excited to have our career coaches in our middle schools and high schools because we feel like that's a good leverage point to start selling education as a profession as early as possible, to plant it in their minds that education is a viable and valuable career path moving forward, and then setting up successful pathways for all of our students.
I think with the
President
reading
Williams.
apprentices too.
Right,
That's
absolutely.
that's another avenue that we have explored, the reading apprenticeship that we have. People starting to understand about what it's like to be a teacher and to work with teachers. And it's just such a great job to have. And the more excited we are about that and the reading apprentices and then the grow your own programs and having some financial ability through Maryland Leads has been quite successful this year.
So that's really the fruit of
Yes,
labor
well,
is
that's part of it,
right
yes.
there, yeah.
President Williams, if I may, and Mrs. Burkhart, you went exactly where I was going in terms of the reading tutor apprenticeships that we have in serving our current 11th and 12th graders. This board, many of you were in attendance as we did a celebration at the end of last year, and Dr. Willow in that presentation highlighted a grow your own plan that provides multiple pathways for students to remain here. In some cases, they may graduate and be hired as a paraprofessional as they continue their education. In many cases, students are getting associate degrees through our partnership with Hagerstown Community College, and then others may want to go on a more accelerated path and get their 4-year degree in 2 years with that associate's degree, and then come back and serve as teachers. But that is part of our strategic plan. Matter of fact, in our extended strategic plan meeting yesterday, that was a point of focus.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Stauffer.
Been a big push in recent years to increase diversity in the teaching ranks and so forth. what are we doing to try to do that? And what are the problems you face in trying to do those things?
So it's really about, so the majority of our candidates come from our regional schools, which are in about a 50 or less mile radius. And they unfortunately do not have very diverse populations within those teacher prep programs. And so what that really means is that pushing further outside of that realm. And again, that's why when I emphasize like Google ads or strategic billboards, that sort of thing, trying to get into areas where they're not familiar with Washington County or Hagerstown and the great work that we're doing here. It's a struggle because it's not, and we've talked about this in years past, the struggle is getting someone to relocate to this area specifically for teaching. It's difficult finding housing. A lot of this generation doesn't particularly pick up and move like previous generations have. They like staying within a certain area, and there are certain sociological reasons for why they do that. And so it's not easy, but we keep pushing out. We have to keep that name recognition up. We have to find any new avenue we can for recruiting, getting out into teacher fairs, talking to everyone that's available. And again, you know, it's diversity is a very broad umbrella, and what that means and who we're trying to bring into Washington County. And so while we've seen some improvement, it doesn't nearly reflect what our student population looks like, and that's ultimately what we're hoping to accomplish. And again, it's very complex what that means.
Mr. Haynes, in your presentation, you mentioned the Maryland Accelerates program. I know you're very much engaged in that. And 2 years ago, of the, I believe, 12 candidates, these are professionals that have a 4-year degree that through our partnership with Frostburg State University had a 1-year residency and they earned their master's degree. 2 years ago, I believe we had over half the cohort that were candidates of color that are now employed for us. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes. And so that's where we need to look also at funding sources. Again, teacher preparation is expensive. And so that's a hurdle for a lot of populations to get into that pathway. And so that's where, as a school district, we need to create those pathways for candidates, be that coming in as a paraprofessional or starting off as a substitute teacher, finding ways to get them within the system, and then setting them up with tuition reimbursement, scholarship programs, that sort of thing to get them, because those are individuals that are here, they know these communities, they would like to stay here. So now how can we help fund their education? Or how can we help put them in connection with outside entities that can help them fund that education?
We need a little help understanding something, and it might be because the numbers are so small. But if we look at the teacher turnover and we look at the teachers hired, does that mean those are new positions when you subtract the teachers turnover from the teachers hired?
For the most part, that is correct. Sometimes those numbers aren't lining up exactly, just depending on when data was collected. But for example,
Look at 2023, 24.
right, correct.
138 teachers went somewhere else, retirement, whatever, teacher turnover. And then when we look at the number of teachers hired, we have 239. That's like 100
We
new
did add
positions.
quite a few positions. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly how many, but that's where we were adding those new ELA and math positions and also the supplemental positions. But we did add quite a few new positions, and there were always new in a lot of different content areas and also in special education where we are adding new positions. And so sometimes I do understand what you mean. And
That's a lot of people.
it is a lot of people, absolutely, absolutely. but we have a lot of students and a lot of needs within this county as well. So
With those additional teachers, that also at the secondary level positioned us better in terms of achieving optimum or desired planning time periods along with instructional time. Is that correct, Mr. Haynes?
yes, that is absolutely correct.
Yes, and the teachers have said that they have experienced a great deal of satisfaction about having that support and that help within the building through supplemental, through different pathways, special education.
Colleagues, any other questions?
All right.
No?
Well, Tim got all of the hard questions, but I'm here to talk about all of the celebration that we've been doing with around new hires and everything. So we're going to start first with Teacher Induction Academy, and there you can see some of the statistics. But Teacher Induction Academy is the big kickoff that we have every year for a teacher induction program, and it's the first event that we like to involve everybody in. We have content specialists, we have supervisors, we have culture and climate, we have lead teachers, administrators, experienced teachers, we have senior leadership, we have the Board of Education, we have students, and we have the community. Everybody plays a key role in welcoming new hires to this community and to the school system. And our goal at Teacher Induction Academy is to get everybody ready, to get every teacher ready for the first week of school. So as we look at the next slide, then we have to get ready for the week after and the week after and the week after. So we have a fully developed teacher induction program for 2024 and 25. And we develop learning experiences that help teachers prioritize the high quality instructional materials and how to use it, adapt to Washington County and the culture of the schools, work through complex teaching situations, and make student-focused decisions based on data, on assessment, and evidence-proven teaching strategies. We also continue, on the next slide, our ongoing new hire support. And these are just some of the ways that we support teachers. Teaching is complex, and here's the people that we get to work with every day. Teaching requires an enormous amount of critical thinking and decision-making. And Washington County and the Teacher Induction Program provide ongoing support throughout the entire year and up to 3 years. The Teacher Induction Program does realize that we must involve all departments and all peoples in order to help us connect to new hires and retain them for years to come. And on our last slide here, really the role of a teacher induction mentor should be the role of a teacher induction program. What I want you to know is that we are committed to partnering, to guiding, modeling, co-teaching, coordinating, collaborating with everyone who is involved in the life of a new hire. And we know the blueprint's important. We will continue to develop a 3-year teacher induction program that meets the standards of the blueprint by offering rigorous professional learning in curriculum and also in creating optimal environments for student learning. And I always ask, how do we get there? We get there through student-focused coaching, because at the end of the day, every student deserves a great teacher, and every teacher deserves a great coach. And that's what Teacher Induction Program is about. And the blueprint calls for it, so I feel like we're right in line.
Just a comment, Joni, it's a wonderful program and a wonderful thing. And I think about how things have evolved since I first became a teacher in Washington County, when was handed a grade book and class lists and shown to my classroom. And then a little later, as I became an experienced teacher, I had the opportunity to participate in what I think they called at the time job-alikes, where they brought the
Yes.
new hires in and you sat across from an experienced teacher and shared curriculum guides and went through textbooks and those sorts of things. But, you didn't hear of mentors, you didn't hear of coaches, and we're investing so much in the success of the people that we're hiring. And
Yes, and I have to say, I have the best team in Washington County Public Schools. What a team. What a joy it is every day to come here and work with them. They are really dedicated and devoted to the success of new hires. And that's what they do. They run impact cycles in coaching, evidence-based impact cycles to where teachers can identify a goal, learn together with the teacher induction mentor and the lead teachers, and we involve everyone, the administrators, like everybody has a hand in this. And then we get to look at, here's the improvement that we've made in the classroom around culture, here's the improvement we've made around academics, here's the improvement that we've made in your life and being part of the Washington County school system. And that's how we get to keep teachers here. That's the key.
Well said.
President Williams, if I may, Ms. Burkhart, you and I have had this conversation. I'm looking at one of the things that we're developing, and we agree that having a high-quality 3-year teacher induction program is really critical in terms of our next phase. For the board's benefit, could you share that conceptual model of how the support may vary in that first year as opposed to second and third year, where that third year we're really looking at cultivating teacher leaders to support needs in the schools?
Absolutely. So we do have a 3-year program currently. We're looking at making it more rigorous as we go forward, more supportive. Not that it's not now. Right now, we involve everybody in this. The first year is very intensive support. You're assigned a teacher induction mentor who comes and works with you, whether you want them or not. And they show up every week, and we use researched based and evidence-based teaching strategies to work them through these impact cycles. We ask everybody to work through at least 2 impact cycles with the teacher induction mentor. That doesn't mean that our mentors, 45 schools, have 8 mentors. They're at 8 to 10 schools every week. Okay, that's what they do. The second and third year currently is with the lead teachers being as the formalized coach, and when support is needed, bringing in a teacher induction mentor who can continue to work with them. As we establish this and as we go through the blueprint, what we're looking at is more of our experienced teachers being able to coach these teachers and work with them so that they have an idea about what teaching is and an idea about the curriculum and how to use the curriculum more effectively, more efficiently. And sometimes it takes a little bit to learn. And it takes time. So after your first year, you get all of this information. Not only do you have to know the academics, form relationships, work through the system knowledge of WCPS. After your first year, your second and third year, that's where you really decide, do I really want to stay in teaching? How can I make an impact? How can I make a difference? And so forming those teacher leaderships, and sometimes we will take our new first-year hires to second and third-year teachers' classrooms because they are becoming the teacher leaders that we want to see in the future. So we go back and we use that experience of what was it like your first year. We do a lot of evaluation around teacher induction program. What would make it better? How can we make it better? What do we need? Quantitative and qualitative data. We use both of these. And then we take those suggestions and roll with those. And what we found is those people who have been in the teacher induction program are so willing to share their knowledge and their skills with the new hires every year.
And we recognize with the critical national teacher shortage, the data is quite compelling in terms of most teachers, they make choices in terms of perhaps making a shift within those first 5 years, thus the importance of a high-quality 3-year teacher induction program so they have those wraparound supports.
Absolutely. And they like that. And they like to know that consistency that is going to exist in a school system like Washington County Public Schools, that we have opportunities here for teacher leadership. And that is one of, I will say, the 2 of the things that they tell us. Yes, they like money, of course. They like to get a salary. They like to be paid. That's important to them. The other thing that's really important to them is a culture of belonging here. Do I belong in Washington County? How do I feel about myself teaching here? And then the third thing is the opportunities for teacher growth. Not everybody wants to become an administrator. That's okay. So how do I perform in teacher leadership? And again, that's another blueprint initiative. National Boards plays into that. part of our pathways. And so I really see that there will be many opportunities here in Washington County for our teachers.
Thank you, Mrs. Burkhardt. Also, I just want to take this opportunity to thank this board. Earlier today, when Mr. Haynes was talking about the board's investment in additional teachers, you saw that trend, an increase in English language arts teachers, mathematics teachers, supplemental teachers at the middle school level. I want to add to that also multilingual teachers. Dr. Willow has provided a lot of support in that area. We've seen exponential growth with our multilingual students. So very strong investment by this board, English language arts, math, middle school teachers, as well as multilingual. So just want to thank this board for their commitment to expanding our teacher workforce. Certainly, as we referenced, in terms of planning, that investment in more teachers has helped us to also create planning time, in particular at the middle school level.
Thank you, Dr. Savine. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Savine, would you like to introduce the team of presenters for our next topic, which is the presentation of the audited financial statement and the auditor's report?
Yes, thank you, President Williams. It is that time of year where we have our annual update regarding our auditor's report. I see our Executive Director of Finance, Mr. Eric Sisler, is going to be leading this discussion, opening comments, and I'll provide him with an opportunity to introduce our team of presenters.
Good afternoon, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Savine. You have before you the audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2024. We have Ms. Sherry Amos of the audit firm Clifton Larson Allen with us here to talk about their reports. Drafts of these statements were reviewed with the audit committee back on September 20th, and we have Mr. Al Martin, chair of the audit committee, with us. He will share his perspective, and I'd also like to recognize Mr. Adam Pelk, our supervisor of accounting, who spearheaded our accounting team through the audit this year. Within the financial statements, there are several different kinds of statements presented that represent different views, as explained on pages 9 to 12. The first two statements on pages 21 and 22 are government-wide and reflect overall financial status, considering both the long and short-term information such as capital assets, liabilities for pensions, and other post-employment benefits. The financial statements that follow those two are more detailed regarding individual funds and do not include the long-term and assets and liabilities, but are otherwise prepared under generally accepted accounting principles. The statement of governmental revenue on page 25 shows that federal funding represented 11.3% of the total current expense fund revenue, which is still higher than what we had seen pre-COVID. Back around 2019, we were at around 5%. So from the last 2 years, we've remained right around 11% of federal funding. So revenue on the COVID relief grants is recognized as expenditures are incurred, and this is the fourth year those grants have benefited our operations. As we get into this new fiscal year, 2025, this is the last year those grants will end. State revenue has been relatively flat, around 60% of the total the last several years, with local revenue representing 25.7% of total governmental revenues compared to 27.8% the prior year. Then we have the budgetary basis schedule of revenue and expenditures that is on page 76, with which the board and the school system management are probably the most familiar. This page shows that our budgetary basis general fund surplus was $6.4 million, or 1.87% of our budget. New this year, the auditors required a change in how we account for the expenses when we utilize the funds that had previously been set aside as committed fund balances. These expenses needed to be captured in the period the costs have been incurred. In the past, we have charged these expenses directly against the committed fund balance and therefore did not show the expenses in the current period. So for example, the expense associated with using the committed fund balance for the Tech High renovation project that had been set aside needed to be run through as a current year general fund expense. Then this is corrected within the fund balance by removing the expense from the unrestricted fund balance against the committed fund balance. Due to this change, we needed to run about $500,000 to the committed fund balance, ending in a total increase in overall fund balance of $6.4 million, as noted previously. As a result of this change, every budget category except capital outlay had a positive budget variance. I'd like to thank Adam and our accountants for all their work this year and their assistance provided to the audit team. I'd also like to recognize the quality of work of our payroll and accounts payable teams who provide excellent service to this organization. In addition, I'd like to thank Mr. Brandenburg, who retired early this year after leading the accounting function for close to 30 years. At this time, I'll ask Ms. Amos to review the audit reports and any other highlights with you, and then Mr. Martin will add his comments, and we'd be glad to take questions at any time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm Sherry Amos. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. This is actually our first year of auditing the financial statements of Washington County Public Schools. So we're very pleased to be here and working with you all. I'd like to express our gratitude to everybody within the school system that provided information, helped us along the way as we got acclimated with your operations, your processes, and your internal controls. We touched many faces and places across the school system, not just accounting, but also payroll, IT. We talked to board members, we talked to the superintendent, and we were really appreciative of everybody's cooperation, providing timely information, and giving us the responses to our inquiries to help our understanding. So I think it was a very good first year, working relationship, and we look forward to continuing that relationship. In terms of the financial statements that you have in front of you and got a great overview of them are the responsibility of management. CLA does prepare the financials for you as an added service, but that does not alleviate management of their responsibilities of ensuring that the information included in those financial statements is accurate to the best of their knowledge, and in also selecting the accounting policies that go into those financial statements as well. The only piece that's really CLA's part of the financial statements is the opinion, which is on pages 4 through 6. I'm pleased this year to inform you all that we did issue an unmodified audit opinion. That is a clean or a good audit opinion. It's the highest level assurance that I, as your auditor, can provide that the financial statements are not materially misstated. I also like to just throw out there, when I do meet with boards such as yourself, is the management discussion and analysis on pages 8 through 19 is a really good summary of the operations and what happened in terms of the financial information for the year. I know the numbers can probably get pretty dry if you're not in my position, but that management discussion analysis, I think, always provides a good overview in layman's terms. It's a great read, short read, but a good read if you're interested. As far as how the audit went and my required communications as to the board, the Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB as we call it, implements new standards every year that we must follow. Usually it's at least one standard, if not more. The standards that were applicable for fiscal year 2024 did not have any impact on the board's financial information. So from that perspective, we thought it was a pretty quiet year. Lately, they've had a lot of standards that we've had to put into practice in the financial statements. So if you're looking at the financial information compared to prior years, there isn't anything new this year that would have caused a change in the comparison for comparison purposes. There are several estimates in your financial statements because their long-term liabilities, and we rely on actuaries for those estimates. So that would be your liability for your other post-employment benefits that you offer your employees upon retirement, the incurred but not reported claims related to self-insurance, so those active claims that employees, as they go to the doctor, are submitting into your insurance company. There's a cutoff period at year end where an employee may have gone to the doctor in the end of June, but that information might not have been remitted to the insurance company and to the board until after the new fiscal year started. And then your liability for your pension as well is also an estimate. All three of those, like I said, are actuarial estimates. For other post-employment benefits and the health insurance claims, the school system does contract with the actuary. There are assumptions, inputs, information that's provided to the actuary for them to be able to perform their calculations. We looked at all that information to make sure it was reasonable compared to industry standards, your peers, as well as any accounting standards that were applicable for those estimates, and didn't have any, thought they were reasonable as far as we were concerned. So we didn't have any concerns with those estimates. We didn't have any significant difficulties within the audit. I think it was just the normal first year trying to get acclimated and get caught up to speed, but no significant difficulties, no disagreements with management to report to you all for this current year. Two things that I'm required to report to you are related to misstatements if they're found by the audit team. We had one uncorrected misstatement that was alluded to where there were some prior year entries to the fund balance that we ran through the current year versus restating prior year financials. From our perspective, the dollar amount was not material, so we passed on restating an agreement with management prior year financial information. As of June 30, 2024, all the ending balances are caught up and accurate, so to speak. There was one corrected misstatement as a result of the accounting for grants, the receivables and unearned revenue. It was about approximately 1.2 million, had no net effect on the fund balance, but management did agree and corrected that. It made that adjustment within the financial information. Management also provided a separate letter to us. I believe it was in your board packet with our reports. We call it a management representation letter. And basically that says that it's a multi-page letter, but in a nutshell, it basically says that management provided us all the information we as auditors requested. They responded to our inquiries with all the information and is accurate to the best of their ability. So that is available for you guys as well to look over. And lastly, to report to the board today, we did have a couple comments that came as a result of the audit. We did not have any material weaknesses in internal control, which is a great testament to the work that's being done day to day with the accounting records. We did have one significant deficiency in internal control related to journal entries. So we did note that journal entries are not routinely reviewed and approved by somebody independent of preparing those entries into the financial system. So we recommend that management put a policy in place where there's proper segregation of duties, where a person that's preparing the entry also has another set of eyes that's looking over that entry and approving it before it hits your financial records. And then we also had two, what we call management letter comments. These didn't rise to the degree of a significant deficiency or material weaknesses, but things that we thought is beneficial for the board to know. The first one was we did have a change in classification in the financial statements related to one of your funds. It was the Fringe Benefit Fund. It was previously recorded as the fiduciary fund. When we came and reviewed the transactions that were being flowed through that fund, and we realized it did not meet the qualification, the definition of a fiduciary fund under accounting standards. So that was just reclassed into the general fund where it probably should have been. So it was just more of just a reclassification in the financial reporting. Didn't change how the board's accounting for those transactions or anything like that. It's a classification in the financials. And then as I alluded to, we did have the one corrected misstatement for the accounts receivable and unearned revenue. We just recommend that management beef up their policies and procedures over that area to make sure that they're properly accounting for the grants as they come, expenditures and revenue come in. So, and with that, that's really all I had for the board today, and would definitely welcome any questions too.
Yeah, and I might add that one of the things the audit committee recommended and the management staff has done is, in addition to the auditor's recommendations, they've also provided their response to that and how they're going to deal with those recommendations. So obviously, they're not just stated and then forgotten about. They're dealt with and procedures are adjusted. So as a committee, we're very pleased to see that.
Colleagues, questions?
Yeah, when was this done? When was the work done?
The work was, so you do have a mandatory or regulatory deadline to the Maryland State Department of Education of September 30th. The work was done, we do preliminary work in the spring timeframe, especially this first year. We came in and got acclimated, gained an understanding of your processes, how you process payroll, how you process disbursements, things of that nature, kind of lay the groundwork. We do pull out then that management close the books at June 30th, give them some time to prepare the financial information. Then we come back in August and September, finish the audit, and then and the financial statement. So, and we did have everything completed in time to be submitted to MSDE by yesterday.
So that has already been presented, and the filing deadlines have been met on that.
Yeah, because we just got this yesterday in an email on 7:07 in the morning. So I personally don't have as many questions as I probably would. But one thing that did catch my eye on page 17, am I reading that correctly, that we have a fund balance of $8 million?
That
An
is
unrestricted fund
unrestricted unassigned.
And that represents 1 week's worth of spending, and that most places, what did it say, 6 weeks worth is what is typical?
Well, the good news is that your cash is more significant than that. It's around, you have the 32 million and then invested funds of around 40. And if you look at your total general fund budget, I'd like to kind of look at your cash position. And the good news is that your revenue streams are fairly predictable. They're fairly assured and timely so far from both the state and the county. And the good news is that your budget is I'm going to say your monthly amount of expenditures for your general fund are around 35 million or so. So basically, you've got about 2 months worth of cash to pay the bills. So the good news is that thus far, staff you have not dealt with cash flow issues about worrying where the money is going to be coming from to meet payroll and other financial obligations of the system.
Correct. And the unassigned number, our unrestricted fund balance is actually 22.8 million. This looks a little different in that this year we included Fund 2 encumbrances, so the assigned number looks a lot higher than what the unassigned shows as. So there's really we've included encumbrances that have been committed that we haven't paid for yet, and we haven't received the revenue that kind of offset the actual expense. But our unrestricted fund balance is 22.8 million, which based on our FY24 budget would be right about 10%. So it's a little bit below that 45-day amount, which would be like 12.3%.
It says it's only a week, though. In the report, it says we only have a week.
That is of the unrestricted fund balance, but I would suggest that you really need to look at where you are from a cash flow standpoint.
But if it's already spoken for, then do we really have that cash? I mean, if I write a check and it takes someone 30 days to cash that check and that money's still showing up in my checkbook, isn't that essentially what we're saying? That we know we already spent that money, or am I just completely misunderstanding
No,
what you're saying?
I think it's really a good statement that when others say, do you all have too much money in your fund balance? It makes a good argument that you don't. And quite frankly, you probably couldn't be comfortable with that number if you didn't have very predictable cash flow streams. And I think your cash balances stay roughly consistent fairly much throughout the year. So it's not like, at June 30th, the financial statement date, it's particularly high. It's just, you know, you need to look at your cash flow and do you have enough to cover your bills and meet your obligations without having some might say too much money or excess funds that, you know, a local funder might say, well, why are you holding that? You know, we'll hold it and give you what you need. But you don't have a lot of excess resources that are unrestricted there after you take all those obligations into account. Here, Adam.
Part of the encumbrances that we have for Fund 2 that we're including are reimbursable grants. So we've got like 6 million of encumbrances that we will get that money in the next month. So we've calling them an expense. They land in your assigned balance, but we're going to get that money in July, August. We've already gotten that money. So that's another piece that kind of increases that.
Yeah, I would just want to add from an audit committee standpoint that I think everything went smoothly this year with the audit. It's challenging for a new auditor to come in and learn about the organization. There's a lot of questions that are asked of staff. And I just want to commend the audit firm and our staff with the board, I think, for handling that very expediently and getting things set up. We now have the contract with Clifton Larson for, this will be the first of 5-year period, pending, successful, completion on everyone's part. So that has worked very smoothly. We're not aware of any issues that have come up, and the suggestions the auditors have made, we're very comfortable that staff has done an adequate job of addressing those. And then the one question, as a committee, we always like to ask the audit or the staff, as the auditors have said, their opinion is the 1 or 2 page opinion that's at the front of the statements. The rest of it, even though they may help compile the statement, is really management's representation. So the question is management comfortable signing that representation letter? And they have, and you have copies of that. So that's good. The one thing, because these statements can be very complex, that I just would alert you or other users or potential, board candidates, if they're trying to figure out the board finances, is the part of this document that's probably most meaningful is the management analysis and discussion, at the front of the statements. And the statements themselves only present 1 year, but balance sheets or statements of financial position, as they're called here in the governmental statements, really are only meaningful when you look at them in a trend of looking at this year versus a year ago. So the financial analysis that's done by the staff in the management discussion and analysis shows that overall net position of the school system improved slightly in '24 for the governmental activities and the business activities to $71.8 million versus $69.75 million a year ago. So that's a positive change. It's not a big change, but it's a positive change there. And then the other thing that's key is what are the trends happening on your revenues and expenses? And that's shown on the next page there, comparing '24 fiscal year ended June 30, '24 to June 30, '23. And there, the total school system, showed a growth in revenues to $464.8 million from $429. Expenditures grew as well to $459.9 versus $418.6 million. And your increase or change in net position decreased from the year before. It was $4.9 million versus $10.5 the year before. So it shows that you're living within your means, that you're managing okay with where the school system is, and that you're, again, there's not a lot of excess fund balance there. But when you look at that cash position versus your monthly operating cost, I feel much more comfortable with that number being closer to what the Government Accounting Standards Board would recommend as they normally recommend a minimum of 15% or 16.7, which would be roughly 2 months of operating resources there. So to your point,
1 week.
Yeah, well, when you look at this, the fund balance there, that's the low point there. But when you look at it from a cash position, you're healthier in that regard. But certainly, no one could say that you have excess fund balance as a system. And when you look at other peers, I suspect that's probably similar with other systems as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, staff has done a great job of discussing some of the key financial highlights. I always like to look at, there are factors bearing on the school system's future, which is the last part of the management discussion. And they're really talking about, three things there. School construction and maintenance funding, which is your capital funding, and the impact of a blueprint for Maryland's future on your budget as you look to the future, and then enrollment trends and the impact those items might have on your future. So I would encourage you to, as members, to take a look at those particular items. The one thing on capital assets is that while it's great to see that in Note 5 to your financial statements, the detail on the capital assets, a total, I'm going to say, well, $9.4 million was added to capital facilities. The disposals or removals of the old items that weren't used anymore was 5.5 roughly. So your total gross amount of fixed assets increased from $449.4 million to $453.4. However, that increase that you had there wasn't sufficient to keep up with the depreciation or the wear and tear on the facilities. And that's noted in the comment on school construction, the fact that your depreciation still is exceeding the new investment in facilities. And if you look at the depreciation, that grew by roughly $12.5 million. And then the disposals or removals of the things that were no longer used was roughly 5.1. So depreciation grew from $226.8 million, this is the accumulated amount, to $234.3 million. So again, your net amount of fixed assets after depreciation declined from $246.5 million down to $241.5. So basically, it was about a $5 million decrease in the net asset position of your fixed assets. And the good news is, you are making new investments and rehab of existing facilities. The bad news is that it's not keeping up. And, again, you do still, I think we're a 70% state-funded community, so new facilities and major rehab is 70% state-funded with just a local 30% match. So I just wanted to, again, point that out because that's probably one of the challenges the school system and our county faces, as well as the impact of the implementing the blueprint for Maryland's future.
Can we look at page 65? What does that mean, the budgeted and actual PAYGO? Could you explain what PAYGO means? The last paragraph there.
PAYGO is a concept of cash flow, looking at money in, money out. I'll let staff elaborate on that. Yeah, part of the
65.
problem while they're looking is that the new GASB reporting model, I say new, it's been around for a number of years now, is that they incorporate a number of elements in these top-level statements that attempt to show very long-term liabilities, like the future pension obligations or your future OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, is basically your retiree health insurance payments and costs. And they also try to put in other elements that aren't part of what, on a budgetary basis, you look at as needing to fund school operations with current money, cash flow coming in, and current cash flow going out. And so the PAYGO elements relate to that cash flow situation rather than some of these non-cash expenses and also some of the non-cash income items as well.
My understanding of of that page, it's talking about that we're paying for the retiree health coverage now. And it's then comparing the benefits that we're paying on behalf of those retirees against our current payroll. Does that,
I think that sounds right.
You can, I guess, take some time, and if you have anything to elaborate on that, I guess you could send us an email or Friday update or whatever. The only thing that I'll add on that is, obviously, I'm very disappointed to find that we have 1 week's worth of spending in our unrestricted balance, but on page 70, when we look at the sensitivity to inflation on our OPEB liability, you know, if we look at that, you know, there's a very big swing that can happen just by a 1% change. And we stopped funding OPEB, our OPEB liability this year, and based on our preliminary discussions and for budget for next year, it looks like we're gonna do the same. So I think that is worth looking at because that money is there for an emergency. And I know that emergencies, you know, it looks like we have things pretty well in order here and that our revenue streams are pretty consistent and we should be able to go and take care of emergencies. But if we knew of an emergency that was going to take place, it wouldn't be an emergency at that point. We'd be able to prepare. And it really worries me that we're starting down this path of throwing that by the wayside. And I really hope that the board can look at that and realize that we have 1 week's worth of unrestricted fund balance. We stop funding our OPEB liability, and a 1% increase could mean a $52 million net increase in our OPEB liabilities. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
President Williams, if I may, this was, the OPEB discussion was part of the Finance and Audit Review Committee's discussion, and I want to give our team members an opportunity to respond regarding that discussion. In particular, Clifton Larson and Alan, I believe, commented on that. There's value and a third-party perspective regarding those items. So.
Sure, I can add maybe just a little bit of industry perspective to the conversation. When it comes to other post-employment benefits and even your pension as well, you can do two things. You can pay as you go, meaning that you pay those claims as they come due from retirees, and/or you can take sums of money and put it away and invest it, so that way you have it sitting there in the future to have as like a savings account for those retiree benefits. I have to say I was actually a little surprised. You guys are 40% funded for OPEB versus a lot. I did kind of just quickly look at some of your peers, a couple school systems in the state that are right around your size, a couple school systems that are a little bit larger than you as well, and didn't find any that were more than 10% funded at this point. So I think one of the trends that we are seeing is that a lot of school systems are facing a lot of challenges in terms of where to spend their money, and the contributions to the other post-employment benefit plans aren't as large or none, zero to that point nowadays than maybe what you saw 5 or 10 years ago. So that is kind of the trend that we're seeing from an industry perspective. Just
You all
adding
should
that
be-
knowledge.
You all should be commended for actually funding as much as you have. And, you know, just to put this in perspective, this sensitivity analysis that you mentioned, that is a fairly new requirement. That's probably only been around within, what, the last 5 years or maybe even 3 years, Sherry?
5 to 8 years, I would say.
Okay, so that's fairly new. I know it's since I retired from the city. We didn't used to have to put that in. It's a new requirement. And the other thing is this whole thing of OPEB dealing with, this used to be a pay-as-you-go thing for governments. So the new reporting model basically required that these liabilities, pension liabilities and post-employment benefit liabilities for governments be reported on financial statements, much as they've been for a number of years for the private sector. It's one of the reasons the private sector basically doesn't have defined benefit pension plans or very limited retiree benefits because of the impact on their publicly funded balance sheets. So this is a new thing for governments, and quite frankly, as Sherry was alluding to, because of budgetary limitations, there are a lot that haven't made a lot of progress in making, I'll just call it pre-funding these liabilities. Most of them are still paid on a pay-as-you-go basis.
I find it very disappointing that we're dismissing the fact that we're just throwing that away and saying that, well, we're 40% funded and that, there's no one else in the state that's 10% that's of comparable size. And, again, this money is meant for emergencies. And if you don't think an emergency will happen, just look at what happened to Detroit 15, 16 years ago. They said they were fine, and all of a sudden they weren't, and they went bankrupt. And so we're sitting here thinking everything's fine. We're dismissing everything, and I find it disappointing that, there aren't many people that are voicing for financial responsibility when we have a week's worth of spending as well.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Amos, you're a CPA, yes? With how many years' experience?
20 years of experience in
20
governmental
years.
accounting.
Mr. Martin, CPA?
I am a CPA, yes, and I have was actively employed in government for 35 years, audited governments for 5 years before that, and I'm still active in doing budgeting classes for Maryland Municipal League in the 13 years since I've retired.
Okay, so with regard to OPEB, we have been what I would consider aggressively funding OPEB. I think, 5 million was, well, we did not contribute to the fund last fiscal year. Prior to that, Eric, was it 5 million, 6 million?
Did contribute this past fiscal year. It's just this new fiscal year that we just started July 1st that we're no longer contributing that 5
Okay, so
million.
it's 5 million, correct?
It was 6 million in total. We
6 million.
contributed 1 million from our self-insurance fund and 5 million from the general fund that was reduced.
Okay,
this-
so
for the
given
new
the
year.
fact that we're 40% funded, what is your opinion of the board's decision to not contribute to OPEB in order to meet the demanding needs of the students in the here and now?
Your current expenses.
Yes, which primarily are the needs of the students in the here and now.
I believe that's a management decision and really isn't an auditor decision, or to
Right.
comment, I want to be very frank with you.
Thank you.
That's you all, as, governance and management and running the Board of Education, have a lot of priorities, and that's what you're here for.
Right,
So to
right.
speak.
Well, I don't mind sharing my opinion. It'd be wonderful if you could more adequately fund these future liabilities that the system faces. But quite frankly, it's a question of limited resources that you have available. And I think the key here, while certainly you need to be aware of these liabilities and their potential and be looking to keep them under control as much as possible, I look at what trend are you making in making progress towards funding them. Now, obviously, if that funding would start to diminish greatly and you're falling behind your peers, that would be an area of concern. If you're holding your own and still doing well, again, these are management issues rather than auditor issues. But I think benchmarking and looking at your peers is certainly something that is valuable to you as a system. And then as you look at your stakeholders and your funders and the community members, and you're allocating your resources, just making sure that you're doing what you should be doing there is important, but you need to be looking at, obviously, your needs that deal with, your primary function or mission. These long-term liabilities, again, are a fairly new thing in the grand scheme of things, in funding governments and public education or public services of all types. And so any governmental unit that has retiree benefits or has a defined benefit pension is dealing with these issues. So I think looking at the trend, are you getting ahead or falling further behind? Are you maintaining your status quo? And how do you compare to others that would be your peers of similar size are key things that you should be looking at to feel comfortable, at least, with where you are. And that's something that certainly could be done easily through the resources that you have through your, Maryland Association and other, Maryland's a small state, so at least you've got a lot, and everyone files these financial statements, so it's fairly easy to look at these public documents and get the data.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Colleagues, any other questions, comments? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And just, I want to recognize our other members of the audit committee that couldn't be with us today, and just thank them. It's a pleasure to be able to help support our school system and the great things we're doing for the kids here in Washington County. So thank you all.
Dr. Savine, do you have anything for us before we
I have nothing
break?
further. Thank you.
Okay. Colleagues, anything, questions, concerns before we end our work session? Okay, thank you.